Kamala is the equivalent of NBC or the New York Times or a very polished media platform, and Trump is a social media influencer. And how do I cover that? Like, what are the key headlines here?
This is the fundamental problem of the modern media, is it used to be the media controlled the pipe. Like, they were literally the gatekeepers. Now we have the opposite, right? Like, all these figures can reach directly to whoever they want. They don't need the media.
Faced with like the bleakest business outlooks in their history, news organizations are going to go for the being preached to subscribers instead of informing subscribers, right?
They completely went down this rabbit hole, created echo chambers of their own people, sought out much more direct citizen-style journalism this time around, and a movement was made.
There's a question of the algorithms, right? Will the algorithm select you such that you're in the For You tab? Grok is deciding what the trends are. I don't know if you've all gotten them, but like Grok decides to say, what's important today is that Kamala finally concedes to Trump.
Why, hello, friends. Welcome to another week of More or Less. We had an election.
We did.
It was a great moment of democracy.
I'm wearing red today because I guess we're all Republicans now.
I'm confused. Yeah.
Okay, so Sam, you kick us off. Why was Donald Trump's reelection a great moment for democracy?
Look, not about the candidates. I just am so proud of America. It's like we're the strongest nation in the history of the world. It's 300 million people, and we're able to have a peaceful civil election, a democracy, like to democratically elect someone in a super polarized environment, and a candidate won, and that's who's now president. And like that's pretty on a historical basis, it's pretty magical that as a country and as a nation that we can do that. That is like America's deep superpower. And I think
Would you have said the same thing if Kamala Harris won and
absolutely. Trump
was telling everybody that there was election interference tonight?
Well, no, if people were rioting in the streets and Trump people were like marching around, like I'd feel maybe a little bit differently. And look, so I guess the reality is maybe we had the easy win because like it's been a very decisive victory, right? For Trump. So like, what are you going to complain about, right? To some degree. I mean, you can complain about a lot of things, but it is what it is. But I don't know. I just think it's something to celebrate. I woke up feeling grateful this morning that someone who clearly half the population, but less than 50% of the electorate really hates is becoming president. And, after being called every name imaginable, and regardless of what you think about him, like there's going to be a peaceful transition and like we can have a war of words without fighting for real. And like that's, again, on a historical basis, that's pretty magical. And I think one of the amazing things about the United States. So go America from my perspective.
What do you guys think, Morins?
I would love to be able to say the same thing 4 years from now, but I'm worried that it might not happen.
1000%. And the reality is, I think if you think about the whole thing and people's obsession with January the 6th, it's right, which is like that really was a disgraceful moment, right? And I understand and I agree with everyone who was super upset about that. And I'm really just hoping that was an anomaly, right? And that was a one-time oopsie and not indicative of a broader trend. Because I agree.
Pretty big oopsie.
Huge. As big as you can get.
The generous take is that if watching his speech last night, I was actually sort of shocked at how metered it was. He really could have taken a victory lap and kind of didn't. It left me somewhat shocked, I guess, given how much vitriol and, intensity there's been around this. And then the decisiveness of this points to a very large movement. And, I'm from Montana. The movement's been somewhat obvious to me for a few years. As you saw, my home state went completely red last night. And so he's at the forefront of this movement, and it may be that he didn't understand the power of the movement back then, and maybe he understands a little bit more now. I don't know. That's like the generous take on it. The other thing that I guess I've been focusing on is what happened in San Francisco. And I think that San Francisco is actually a really interesting it's not anomalous, actually. San Francisco is kind of ground zero for, I think, what the future of the liberal side of the house looks like. You had a city that 10 years ago experimented with a lot of deeply progressive policies that largely, most of them, you could argue 80% of the progressive ideas just flat out didn't work and resulted in a pretty chaotic and very messed up city that we all have to deal with. And the community here came together, got really focused on policy over identity. You didn't see almost no identity politics in San Francisco this time around. People were focused on very serious policy issues. They elected a new mayor, new commissioners.
Yeah, go Daniel Lurie.
Yeah, congrats, Daniel Lurie. Are overhauling the charter. There's like all kinds of things that point to, the liberal side of the house actually learning some pretty serious lessons and
recriminalizing stealing. That's a good idea.
It's like property crimes illegal again. And I think it's actually a sort of bright spot in what was otherwise a pretty bad strategy on the liberal side of the house. And so maybe we're looking at what the future of the party looks like in San Francisco right now.
Yeah, I'm psyched about San Francisco. And again, to your point, Dave, I mean, I really, I was thinking about it this morning, and I do think big picture, it's pretty clear this is all about people want houses and the economy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's like the big picture story.
Absolutely.
Is like, I mean, from the people I've talked to who voted, for Trump, who you might not have expected to for all sorts of reasons, they're like, yeah, like I kind of want to be able to buy a house, and I think I have a better shot under Trump
and afford groceries.
And I think I have a better shot under Trump than I do under Biden. Rightly or wrongly, that's like, the incumbents pay a tax on that, and like that is like that's the easy policy. And but I think there is a deeper thing going on, which is I honestly think that like what we saw from a strategy perspective in terms of the future of these parties is that Trump, because he's a reality TV show star and one of the best, was really at the forefront of modern communications.
Yeah, no question.
And how to tell stories in the internet age. And I cannot overstate how much the Democrats do not understand, at least at the national level.
For sure they don't.
Let's put a quick pin. I need to give listeners some roadmap to this episode as it unfolds. So we got our initial how's everyone doing out of the way. I do think we should spend some time on what Sam is talking about, which we are a little more experts on than other political topics, which is the communication, the media, the storytelling. We talked about this potentially being the influencer election last week. How's that played out? I want to make sure we also get through some of the implications for tech policy, crypto, AI, information. I had a great subscriber call this morning with some experts on that, and antitrust, Lena Khan, so on and so forth. And at some point, we're going to have a guest pop in as well. So we've got a lot on the agenda. But Sam, why don't you pick up the communication points? Say more about what you think Trump got right and that Harris got wrong.
We've talked about a few angles of this before, like the influencer strategies, et cetera. But I think at a high level, the thing that I think people really don't understand fully or haven't internalized about the internet versus, let's call it broadcast media, is in the era of broadcast media, communication was precious, right? Like you got your soundbite in, and that soundbite better be perfect, right? And you better like appeal to everyone because it was going the same thing was going to everyone, and like everything was about that. And like you saw what Kamala did was like, this strategy of saying almost nothing, right? Being almost nowhere, and then trying to manicure and like weave the needle on the perfect message every time. Trump is obviously a volume guy, right? He just says everything at scale, right? And on one hand, that drives a lot of people nuts because he says a lot of crazy shit, right? And like wrong things, right? And I understand why, especially if you're trained in last generation's media, that will drive you crazy and seem insane. But the whole thing is like, it's a high volume game where only the real, like you basically can iterate as much as you want because the communication is free, right? You can just be constantly talking and trying to find the one or two gems that matter and break through. And then you just hang your hat on those. But then just as importantly, because the channel is always open, the stuff you say that's crazy, you can just say another thing tomorrow,
really
right? Like, which is not how the traditional media of mass media works. Like you had your shot at the evening news and that was your shot. And so I just think that there's like this massive sea change. And like, if you think about it, it's like, it's internet communication with an open fat pipe where you can speak to everyone all the time lends itself towards going for home runs, 1000x winner statements, 1000x winner moments, and then just like burying very easily everything else, right? It's kind of almost like seed investing, right? It's a game of going for that 1000x. Whereas I would argue that broadcast media feels a little bit more like growth investing, where like you can't miss and you have fewer bullets,
Hmm.
right? And so I feel like one way to visualize this is
Smart analogy.
Kamala's entire strategy and the Democrats' strategy is last century's playbook for how to run communication. I mean, even now, like, people were saying, well, Kamala might win because for the first time ever, they have like a field organizer running the campaign. That's like never happened before. So he's gonna have an amazing ground game. And you're like, ground game in the physical world, but that's not where this is happening, right? This is happening on the internet, right? And so like, I just think they've completely, set aside policy, set aside all the other stuff. Like, if you just get down to how do you run a modern campaign with targeted influencers in the places that matter with an open pipe versus mass media, biggest voices, like Trump just like either intentionally or by happenstance has exactly the right internet strategy, and Kamala has exactly the wrong internet strategy.
So a couple of thoughts, Sam. I think there's some really interesting points. I think one point about, though, there's been a lot on, I think the ground game still does matter. And in fact, one question I've had is specifically trying to pinpoint the ways Musk impacted the election, because obviously there's his digital game with Twitter and all of that. And people who follow this far closer than I say really like the grassroots ground game in Pennsylvania was really entirely driven by him, which I don't know enough to know other than smart people are telling me that. But I guess, and you raise a really interesting point. This is a completely different communication strategy. Say everything. Call Nancy Pelosi an expletive. Say journalists should be put in jail if they don't reveal their confidential sources. See what sticks. Don't worry. How should the media cover that? Because this is already raising, I think, an interesting question. And I broke my silence. And I used to have a column, guys. I used to write every week. 9 years in or so, it only comes out sporadically. And
you're a busy woman. Come on.
And it's fine. It's still there. It's still dusted off. And my people are still there. So thank you. But this morning I published a piece really getting into, I think, the bind that major news organizations are in, but also some of the mistakes they're making early on. But I'm curious, Sam, will sort of like, I don't believe I'm asking you for advice on this, but I am, because you're very knowledgeable. Like, in a world where not just Trump, the candidate, is hard to cover, but the fundamental forms of like how powerful figures communicate, which is say anything at any time. Obviously, each of those sound bites cannot be a headline plastered across the New York Times, or can they?
They don't need to be. In some ways, that would be like a silly thing to do, right? Because they don't need, like, this is the fundamental problem of the modern media, is it used to be the media controlled the pipe. They controlled like what was going in everyone's brain. And there was a really interesting economy around that, because if you're a candidate, you have to talk to the press because that's how you get to people, right? Like, they were literally the gatekeepers. And there was a really interesting economy because you could basically trade with them. Like, okay, like, we'll get out the thing you want to say, but in return, you're a source, and like, you're going to give us other things you don't want, or like, we're going to have a civil discourse about this or disagree. Like, there's a whole like social economy to the pipe, right? There was in some ways, think about it as it's like a connector cable with like, a chip in the pipe, right? That worked really well. Now we have the opposite, right? Like, all these figures can reach directly to whoever they want. They don't need the media. That's bad. That's good for them. They can run this alternate media strategy to a point, but it puts the press in this really awkward place because they no longer have a bargaining chip with these people to work with. Like, they don't, and because of that, that makes them by default go very negative on everything because there's no trading, right? Like, they're like, well, you're going to say all the positive things yourself. So like, the default, I'm not saying this is the healthy thing to do, but I'm saying the default strategy saying, well, if you're going to say everything positive yourself, then we're only going to look for the things that are not being said, which then creates this very, I think, like, contentious relationship, because it used to be good and bad. And now the default scenario, I'm not saying this has to happen, but the default scenario is everyone says, well, you're going to say all the crazy good stuff yourself. We'll say the bad stuff.
There's some truth to that, but I'm asking a different question, which is like, what should the media, and I'll just call it traditional media, right? What should non-social media, professional news organizations, how should you cover?
Isn't that the bifurcation of this? Like what Sam's analogy is saying is that Kamala is the equivalent of NBC or the New York Times, or, a very polished media platform, and Trump is a social media influencer. And so like, how would the information cover everything a social media influencer says that's tweeting all day? And like,
I don't think you cover everything. I think
And I think that's what Jess is asking is like, how do I cover that? There's so much garbage in, garbage out. Like, what are the key headlines here? It's changing every day, you know?
I think the answer is you have to figure out, like, you have to assume that the channel is constantly being chaffed and 99% doesn't matter. And no one wants to follow everything Donald Trump says. No one wants to follow everything anyone says. Find the gems, figure out what's real and what's not real, figure out what he believes and doesn't believe, right? Become the trusted source where basically your job is to read everything he writes, talk to every person he talks to, have all the sources on the inside, and be able to separate out what is reality and truth from like bluster or not real or chaffing.
Yeah, you've nailed it, Sam. And we've talked about it several times on this pod, but my framework for this is that Trump is a UFC character or a WWE character. And so everything that he's doing is it's an act, right? And so nothing that's actually going on is the real deal. And so the job of the real media, people who do this professionally, is to figure out what the truth is, right? Like what's the real thing under the smoke screen? What's the real thing under the entertainment, right?
I agree with that, but
that's the actual thing that most people don't understand. And to some extent, I think this election is the first real social media election. And it happened in a way that we didn't expect, right? Like we thought that this was going to happen when Facebook and Twitter in 2008, and then through the 2010s, we thought they were social media elections. But this was the first election where you had candidates going directly to the people through podcasts, right? Like podcasts were an enormous part of this election, I think.
Well, amazingly, but Dave, hilariously, we only had one of the two candidates, and that was the problem, right? Like,
no, I know, but that's what I'm making your point, Sam, which is
Yeah.
that Trump went to the podcast, just literally talked to people directly in their ears, which is what we're doing right now. And one of them didn't, right? And so you've got a really good example of the old media and the social media campaign once again. And maybe the other party will, or the Democratic Party will actually learn the lesson this time. We thought they learned last time around and the time before that, but maybe this time they will actually learn. But just back to your question, I just think you're already doing it, right? Like you're doing this and doing it quite well in tech. So you already know the answer to the question, right? Like you've been dealing with this media environment for a very long time.
I mean, yes. And look, I think the next 4 years may be as consequential for the future of professional news publications as any that in recent memory. And that's saying a lot because the news industry has been under sort of attack and distress and business for like some way or another since like even like long before the internet. And so this is a long, long march, but I think so many things could be landing in a moment in a big way. And, yes, it's very simple to say, don't cover what Trump says, cover what he's going to do.
Yeah, watch their feet, not their mouth, right?
Of course. But by all accounts, Trump will run his administration in a way where he might not know what he's going to do until he thinks it and does it, and his advisors don't know what he's going to do too. So I think it's a unique challenge, not one that I think that's the right principle, but in reality, I don't think that's how you play out, that you sort of tune out his statements and then, there's some other sense of truth or authority that's easy to get at.
It's not about tuning it out. It's about listening to it and then finding the truth, right? It's not.
Can I make 2 points? One is, Jez, I think what you're basically pointing to is the fact that like for the last 100 probably years, to be grand about it, what the media has done, especially in Washington, is actually cover the bureaucracy. Right? Like it's basically been a thing where like the bureaucracy functions a certain way and there are inputs to it. And if you really understand the bureaucracy from the outside and who actually moves what files and what cabinets and how things actually work, you can go like behind the scenes and talk to those people and figure out what's actually going to happen and tell people reality versus kind of perception. Right? And I think what's happened in the digital age is for a whole bunch of reasons, including we can get into AI and efficiency and technology, is like the patterns of the bureaucracy are changing quite rapidly. And to your point, we're moving into a very culty, personality-driven era because of that fat pipe of communication that's now available. So here's the question is, if you said that all of Trump's next 4 years are going to be completely done in his head with talking to no one and no one will have perspective on it, and there's just a bunch of random statements, and then it's very, very hard to cover. The reality is what actually happens in quote-unquote elite circles, we are all in these, is people will run around and say, Yeah, he's saying that, like, people in the know, and we'll say he's saying that, but he doesn't really believe that. He's never going to do that. Da, da, da. And everyone officially, the Democrats say this, the media says this. Well, how can you say that? He clearly said X, so like we're going to hold him to that. And then everyone in privacy was like, yeah, don't worry about that. And it sounds really dangerous because you're like, everyone's saying believe the man, he said it, right? And other people are saying no, don't believe him. That's just bluster. Yeah. And I think that what the future of media has to be sorting that out.
That's a great point.
Right? And sorting it out with those human connections. Like, in the end of the day, what does the media really do? It basically finds out the inside secrets that the elites know and then just tells everyone else those secrets.
Well, and we are seeing more and more like social media platforms that are able to even leverage AI to do some of this, right? To figure out and fact check a bunch of these things, to figure out the right point of view, the left point of view, the median point of view, like where consumers are leaning on this, all of that.
Yeah, but no AI. I mean,
yeah, Jess and I will probably come out very anti on the AI side of that, Britt.
No, I'm pro. Like, look,
why wouldn't you use AI to like leverage like the topic you posted about today about the New York Times headline, coming out being pretty ridiculous this morning.
To me, I define journalism very narrowly, more narrowly than, I don't know, probably any other journalist. I define journalism as uncovering new facts that largely people want hidden. Like, I mean, I don't define it that way, but like, I think that is an incredible value to the world, to society, and it doesn't always have to be antagonistic, although by definition, like, what has become abundant, information's become abundant, knowledge of what's happening in the world has become abundant, opinion has become abundant, but there are important facts that journalists can get at responsibly that and so when people talk about AI and journalism doing that, like AI can't do that. It can do a lot of the other things.
Well, it can do like sentiment analysis.
Yeah, but that's not journalism, that's sentiment analysis,
well,
right? I mean,
fine, but
it's content. It's content, right? And it could be something news organizations fold into their products, right? For sure. Just one more point on this, though, too. I mean, and we talked about the Washington Post, which saw this flood of cancellations when Bezos pulled the op-ed or the opinion piece, the presidential endorsement.
That really would have made the difference.
But everyone was shocked that so many people left. And I was not at all shocked because those were people who had come for opinion, for the hot takes, for being preached to. And already today, and we're taping this the day after the election, we're seeing publications like Slate, known as a sort of progressive left-leaning publication, that are championing their surge in subscriptions. And I'm worried that faced with like the bleakest business outlooks in their history, news organizations are going to go for the being preached to subscribers instead of the informing subscribers, right? And this is going to only accelerate, perhaps precipitously, what we've seen in terms of decline in trust in these organizations that are really the only ones with the current wherewithal to employ like thousands of journalists. And that's what I'm worried about.
I just think you're right, Jess. This is what happened. This is literally what happened. And I think is also largely why the Twitter X thing happened, largely why podcasts were such a big part of this election, because I do think the media organizations, you just described it perfectly. They completely went down this rabbit hole, created echo chambers of their own, making, and largely in a huge group of people sought out much more direct citizen style journalism this time around, and a movement was made, right? Like that's literally what happened.
But we have a guest and I want to get to him, but I would say that, but just to put one thought in there is like, opinion's cheap.
So cheap.
Right? Like this is like the greatest marketing moment that the liberal publication is going to see for a long time. They're like, oh shit, everyone's super outraged and wants to spend $20 on something. Like, you'd be dumb to not go pick up those dollars if you're Slate. I mean, in the short term is what I'd say. 2, opinion's really cheap to produce, right? Outrage is very inexpensive. And so if you think of it from a purely business perspective, the biggest problem is that these things are called news organizations. They're not news organizations. They're just like opinion content mills, right? That suck up people's outrage dollars. And like, I as a business person, totally get it, totally respect it. You probably do need a new class of actual journalism products, which, by the way, Jess, you run one of.
I think that's actually the truth. You're already doing it.
And then you just have a brand confusion problem, because the problem is, just from a very brass tacks perspective, that these publications are not actually news organizations. They are ways of sopping up outrage dollars and turning it into opinion content.
Nailed it.
Have captured historically the news brand, which is screwed because they're not actually news organizations.
Perhaps we could just be information. Perhaps that's the rebrand, right? Perhaps.
Yeah. You have to seed the news brand.
And we've completed our advertisement for the information today.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I could go on, Dave. Don't.
Well, and Dave, you're such a fan of Sam's points today. Dave said nailed it to Sam like 5 times already in this episode.
They're good ones. Sometimes he wins, sometimes I win. Yeah.
But the most important thing is it's all about volume. You just get as many statements out as you can. And some of them resonate.
I will say, Sam, I used to think that the volume, Sam used to tell me behind closed doors all the time, Dave, you need to get out there, you need to do way more volume. And I didn't believe him. And this podcast has taught me that he's right. Like, it's really, really good to just be out there talking.
Amen.
Okay, Brent, introduce our guest.
I'm so happy to see this person.
I'm so excited. We finally made
Good to
this
see you all.
work.
I don't know who you are, but I love the mustache.
Hold on. Guillermo Rauch, founder and CEO of Vercel. Guillermo is is like on the forefront of what's happening with all things AI, even has some post-election trauma, maybe I could say, of not from the election results, but from what's happened with Vercel over the last many days. But
Vercel is so awesome.
Also, I think would want to come on and give us kind of your lay of the land, both in terms of the next 4 years, but also where this all can lead to within tech. Because of a Trump presidency. But first, maybe can you just give the public a little bit of a background on what is Vercel? And
well, first of all, can we just assume, because we are in the business of disclosure, that you guys are investors in this?
No, we're not.
You're not? Oh my God.
They're users.
God.
We wish we were.
We just love Guillermo and we love Vercel.
Look at Sam. Sam doing the disclosure point. I've trained him well. Okay.
I love it though.
Will you do the Labrador Retriever version of what it is you do? Like
That's by the way, that's the ultimate endorsement, because you all are investors and you have me on and you love the product. So it's legitimate endorsement. So so you mentioned the forefront of AI. So Vercel builds the front end cloud. We host everything that is between a visitor of the internet and a really cool new product on the web. So the front end of Perplexity, for example, is built with our technology. A lot of the innovators in AI are using Vercel to create new kinds of applications, but also we host things like e-commerce, news. In fact, in terms of the election, we hosted the election microsites for Washington Post. We hosted polymarket.com, which was extremely hot this election, like quite literally hot in terms of like how many servers and how much infrastructure it took to help them scale to the tremendous amount of traffic that they got yesterday. Vercel is the easiest place to go 0 to 1 on an idea. And increasingly that's being done with AI. So people are like literally just like creating applications on the fly with AI.
Guillermo, let me push you.
Yeah.
I'm a Labrador Retriever, very cute dog. Explain this to me like I'm a puppy.
This isn't plausible. Yeah.
this is like an AI prompt.
Are you Heroku 2.0?
He looks nothing like a Labrador Retriever.
I like it. The Labrador dog needs to make the Heroku comparison.
This is a very capable Labrador dog. So think of it as like
a small child.
The best place to host applications and build them, especially when they're pushing the frontiers, like AI applications or things that will get a lot of traffic all of a sudden, like it happened with Polymarket yesterday. And every year it's getting easier and easier and easier. If you use the like foundational cloud infrastructure today, like AWS or Azure, it's really, really difficult to turn your idea into reality. It'll take you a team of experts and it'll take you weeks just to set up the foundations. Imagine Vercel just giving you the foundations on autopilot so that you just focus on your idea. And there are a lot of people building their ideas on the platform. We do hundreds of billions of requests per month, and we host some of the largest websites on the internet and some of the smallest websites on the internet. So it's for everybody.
All right. I'm not sure the Labrador Retriever understands, but I'll go play with it and we'll figure it out.
You know, Sam, as somebody who's, you know, you and I have built things on Heroku, we've built things on all these versions of this over the years. I will say I've built more stuff with Vercel this year than really any year I've been building anything. And I'm just so impressed with the tools that Guillermo has made that just make software engineers' lives easier, straight up. Like
I'm signing up now.
You can build stuff fast.
And Guillermo, I remember I have the privilege of having asked you these very dumb questions midsummer, when I think we met at a conference. So I already know the answer to them. And Guillermo was a speaker at the Information's AI Summit, right?
Oh, nice.
I'm not making
that's
that
correct.
up, right? Okay, good.
Walking distance from my office. Thanks for choosing a great location.
There you go. We make it convenient. Coming back 2x next year, 2025.
Let's go.
But like, why does this need to exist? Like, why, and what are you fundamentally leveraging that all the other ways that people build websites today are missing?
Yeah, it really depends on the size of the customer. For e-commerce websites, for example, we just give them a lot of new revenue because we make their website so fast that you put it on Vercel and you get better SEO, you sell more stuff. People convert at a higher rate. So for example, UnderArmour.com runs on Vercel. ASICs, like when you buy shoes, Vercel is behind the scenes, hopefully of the best experiences on the internet, and most visitors on the internet won't know, but they will like that website more because it feels better. So when think of it as like a global acceleration system, not only just the way to build it. And the other reason that it's needed is that, especially with the advent of AI and code generation, Vercel is almost becoming more like a design tool. Is that it's just so easy to create software these days.
Yeah.
Actually, I met Dave and Britt in a trip in Kyoto and Tokyo, and we were generating software on our phones.
This is when you guys came back and said you had started like 3 companies on your vacation, and we were like, how
Yeah.
Yes.
This is the future, guys.
How Morin of you.
Guillermo and I were walking around Kyoto and we're just making software while we're having a conversation. Yeah. Like, it was unbelievable.
Shouldn't you guys have been eating sushi or something? Okay.
I'm trying to deploy our more or less podcast website with Vercel right now, and I'm getting a bundle install issue.
Okay.
So.
Let's not troubleshoot live from the air.
Sam, once you get this up and running, you're going to use it for everything.
If you want to build with AI, go to v0.dev, which is sort of like our, think of it as like the Labradors of the world. We'll start with v0, whereas Vercel is for the web engineers.
Oh, you're just using the more technical version, Sam. You got to take it down a notch.
I don't know. I'm a pretty technical Labrador Retriever as far as labs go.
So, Guillermo, I'm interested. Give us like the behind the scenes of what was happening with internet traffic right before the election.
Yeah. So we saw some attacks. So part of our job is to distribute traffic globally. So when we were in Japan and we were accessing any of these websites like Nintendo's, it was likely routing us to the Vercel region in Japan so that we could establish a very low latency link and render the best possible experience for us in Japan. And so what Vercel does is it has a global footprint on top of the cloud to, again, make it like super fast to access all these websites everywhere. But also, we mitigate attacks and we mitigate like massive spikes of illegitimate bot traffic. And we've become really good at detecting what is human traffic and what is bot traffic. And then within the world of bot traffic, what is a good bot and what is a bad bot? A good bot, for example, is Google. You want Google to crawl your website.
Most of the time.
Maybe, yeah. Right? There's actually...
Depends on which Google bot. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
So now there's kind of like an intermediate of like, I'm not so sure bot, which is all the AI labs. And recently became controversial that ByteDance spun up a massive crawling operation that was like even dwarfing some of the other AI labs. And then actually that's up to the customer. Like, do you want ByteDance to like sort of like scrape all your website multiple times a day? But then there's also legitimately bad bots. Like, they create activity that is sort of designed to impede and deny the service. And we saw over the past 48 hours quite a bit of that. The largest attack that we saw, which we estimate was actually probably targeting some of our customers in the sort of like prediction market space for reasons that I can't fully share, but the attack was pretty sizable, 150,000 IPs, a globally distributed botnet. Easy for us to mitigate, but again, like if the customer is just trying to figure out the internet and create their application, it would have been trivially put offline. And when you think about it, Vercel hosts a lot of crypto websites, a lot of decentralized networks, a lot of the front end to a lot of the NFT companies and decentralized exchanges, etc., the monetary losses that can be incurred in can actually be used for trading, right? So like if you attack Polymarket or you attack Kalshi, then I'm assuming that the attackers might have interests in mind around like manipulating the outcomes of a bet and so on and so forth. So luckily we weathered the storm and our customers saw no impact. But I do think it's interesting that like the battlefield really is becoming sort of your ability to put these things online and trade on them, which I think is a very new thing of this election.
So how do you charge? Could you charge like a vig on what you save
I
people?
wasn't expecting we would be interviewing him about Vercel.
Got some business journalists here.
I love it, Sam.
Let's go. So like, I don't like, you're saving the,
This is like becoming a pitch meeting, Sam.
It's like you versus Cloudflare, right?
Yeah.
To defend the web, right? And presumably if you're so good and you're stopping all these attacks there with real world money, shouldn't you be taking a percent off the top?
No,
like you don't want to charge some basic hosting fee. That's lame.
We only want to charge for legitimate traffic, right? So we don't charge for mitigating these attacks, of course. We believe that security has to come by default. Like if you create an app on the internet, you should never have to worry about the bad actors. In fact, my metaphor to this, if you all were around, probably all of us here in this room were, like when I first got my Windows PC, it got viruses so fast. I don't know if you all remember the toolbars that would get added to web browsers, like with malware of all kinds. Windows became synonymous with like, you have to install a bunch of antivirus software. Otherwise, your personal computer is not safe. And then I switched to the Mac and I never worried about an antivirus again. Vercel's point of view in this world is if you're going to create an application, especially if we want to empower everybody in the world to create applications and deploy them, it has to be secure by default. So we don't charge you for mitigating these really large attacks. We charge you for the power. Think of it as the power that you use, almost if it were a nuclear power plant, to render your application, which has varying degrees of complexity. For example, Polymarket.
No, I get it. It's just like it's like not as good a business as extortion.
True,
right? Like it's a better business.
Yeah.
If you're gonna be like, look. Like Guillermo, I wonder if you're not like really fully leveraging the business model.
You're thinking
here.
too small, Guillermo.
Guillermo, you're talking to a venture capitalist that gives creators contracts that take all of their future earnings from them.
You're not
for the rest of their life.
Not all of them.
Think bigger.
10%.
It's fine. Dave's chaffing my channel. It's fine. It's not a big deal.
Okay, can we go back to like some of the election stuff?
Yeah.
Or did you want to continue to the pitch?
I learned from the best, Sam.
Okay. I want to know, I mean, some of the implications, right, everyone are talking about, especially around AI, is that it's definitely going to be accelerating now. Like we all know crypto is something that Andreessen and Trump were in cahoots on, but
I think we saw less of the AI will be used for like fake content to some extent. I don't know what you all think about this, but
you mean in the marketing?
I think we saw it and we laughed, right? I mean, like,
right.
Yeah, the deep fakes went pretty quickly from the like, NBC News breaking news alert every time there was a deep fake,
right,
to kind of like our brains sort of figured it out. And I'm not to say there aren't things that we should be concerned about, but I am surprised like how quickly.
Well, yeah. I think it goes to the conversation we had before about pipe size, right? Which is like in a constrained mass media environment, you're super, super scared of like one wrong thing going through the pipe, right? In internet era, the reality is like it's just noise. It just raises the volume of more noise.
There's so much of it.
There is an impact, which is it devalues the nth thing even more because you're like, it's all just noise. Who cares? But like it just raises the temperature on everything. But it is far less of like a specific attack that anyone's worried about of like a credible deepfake, and more just like you don't pay attention to anything.
Yeah. And there seems a broader lesson in there about human psychology too. But anyway.
But if one of the outcomes is like less regulation within the AI industry, Guillermo, do you think that's a good thing at large?
I mean, my perspective has always been everyone needs to be empowered to create. Everyone needs to be able to own their own domain name. It's one of our sort of core tenets. I do like that we have all these social networks that people can post to, but if you're not betting on open protocols and access to like the source, right? Like go direct to consumer. Own your space on the internet. Like you own the information.com. That's amazing. Like
ask Sam how many URLs he owns for
how many domains do you have?
Sam, how many URLs do you own, Sam?
Oh, I pop those things like Pez. I'm sure Dave does too. I'm actually buying one right now as we speak.
Do you guys remember, by the way, Morans, when we had a whole ski trip like a decade ago and we only bought domain names?
Did we do I did a competition with somebody. I forgot if it was you guys about which couple owned the most domain names.
I want to do a party in San Francisco where if you come, you have to have a name tag of your favorite domain name that you own.
Yeah. Or how many. So we sell domain names, which is actually a terrible business, but we understand the psychology of creators, which is that, again, our goal is to go from 0 to 1 as fast as possible with the least amount of latency. And we realize that like people get stuck at like naming their thing is so important because they become emotionally attached to the creation and they want to move forward with it. So we do offer very, very, very fast domain search and purchase. And I do own my own fair share of domain names. But going back to the point,
Guillermo, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's so important that there's this question of like freedom of speech and X that's censored versus not censored and whatever. There's a question of the algorithms, right? Which I think is a meta question. Sure, you can post anything, but will the algorithm select you such that you're in the For You tab? And so I think fundamentally still will be a diehard of try to own your own space of the internet and making sure that that remains sort of the open platform for everybody.
But Guillermo, can I push you on that? Like, obviously, like that's historically been true, in a lot of ways. But all this, who you route to, what websites are available, where, the whole like effectively social contract of the internet's breaking down anyway. So like, sure, like it's like a relatively low level of the internet, right? Like DNS and like, owning at that level. But if you're kind of either any from the spectrum of like blocked out of Google to like, not in the AI interface all the way through, like, how do you think about that like on a longer term basis? Because it's true, you can own your corner, but it is still a social contract that anyone cares that you have that on DNS.
Yeah, one thing I think a lot about from the AI point of view is we're going to be relying more and more on agents to go and get information for us.
Correct.
And that's already happening with Perplexity. It's already happening with the AI overview panel on Google Search. And so if what you're producing is content that is sort of like facts and general knowledge, it's very likely that you're not even going to get backlinks because someone's going to search on Google, for example, what is HTTP? It used to be a valid content marketing strategy, and like marketers in the Valley used to do this, like create a lot of content so that when people search, you'll hit the keywords and whatever. But increasingly, a lot of that traffic will just stay in the AI front ends, right? Because it becomes part of the AI overview, or it becomes part of the Perplexity summary. I think the opportunity is actually, interestingly, in focusing on the individual perspective, focusing on like the kind of, I actually see the stuff that you post, like this big images on Twitter, which I actually kind of hate them because I can't read.
Yeah, you're not the only one that hates them. You know what I'm going to do about it? Nothing.
Did you pay him to say that, Sam? I mean, that was like the perfect. Okay, keep going.
Like you're never going to get summarized away by AI overview. This is Sam's perspective.
Some might say I was ahead of my time. I'm worried about the image scraping eventually.
Yeah.
But, I mean, some might say I was ahead of my time in being anti-AI-able.
The question is whether the AI even cares. Yeah.
Some might say.
So I call this like frontier content. When you have content that kind of like bypasses the great AI filter, and most of that I think is going to be experiential, like personal. It's probably going to amplify a lot of hot takes and like things that the For You algorithm likes in general, which is like a strong opinion that someone holds. That again, like it goes beyond the purview of AI. I actually think another thing that's really interesting about Twitter is that they have this like Grok summaries. Like Grok is deciding what the trends are. I don't know if you've all gotten them, but like Grok decides to say what's important today is that Kamala finally concedes to Trump. So we are starting to see sort of like AIs act as like the editorial room of a lot of the content that we create. But after you click that, we're still there. So,
but that's fucked. I mean, like, like just to push you, like the thing that I think people really miss about this is like that's fine at a first blush, but people forget that the internet is not just an information platform. Technically, it's an information economy. It's a
Right.
content economy. And the thing I think that's so fucked about this whole AI move is like, in the one boxes in the direction is like, you're just gonna break the entire machine for truth, right? Because you just get a reflection of whatever the economics are of the system. And if the economics are, oh, we're just gonna like, there's no way to monetize it, you know, or even now it's like it's easy to monetize hot takes, but not actual information or truth, then like you're screwed, right? You're just gonna end up like completely stemming the entire information as an information machine. So I don't know. I understand. I think you're right that that's the direction we'll head in, but it is like a total tragedy of the commons where like these things are going to consume themselves and die.
But Sam, I think that this is the reason that maybe the commons is a tragedy and that we should move in the direction of this era of more personal apps, right? And more like not just more personal apps, but smaller social contracts, right? Like, you know, the ability to create an app for, you know, a smaller community that you're a part of and do it very quickly. Agree, and, you know, these types of things. And Guillermo was one of the first ones that really, I think, clarified. Guillermo, I think you were telling me in Japan that there's something like 4 million software engineers on Earth today. You know, that's a really small number.
Yeah, for what we do, which is React, which is like the front end, there's 4 million is the best estimate we get from Google. And for creating interfaces, which is very much like a design thing, right? Like it's like a creative act. It's very small. Like we should get like 1 billion people creating software. And I think, Dave, this is also, I think, kind of like part of your journey is if you get everybody to create software, you're now like decentralizing it.
Yeah.
You're creating less like software that tries to do everything.
Yeah.
So like less Salesforce. It's like the tower is like right next to our office. Salesforce is a thing that like Katamari like absorbs more and more software. There's a banger thread on X about like how like Salesforce built itself through M&A.
Yeah.
Like how they bought Marketing Cloud and Salesforce Commerce Cloud and
it's
whatever.
Like Instagram and X and all these things are like the low income housing of the internet. And like we need to like move people out of these things into their own housing, right? And enable infrastructure that like helps people talk to each other.
Can I just play devil's advocates on a few points? I like everything you guys are saying and think it's probably right.
I don't.
No, you have to like this one. This one is like objective. Who likes huge bundles of software instead of software that is curated to you and created by
totally
you?
Personalized. Yeah.
Well, a couple people. One, people who still don't want to do the work. So yes, the barrier to entry or ceiling or whatever could plummet, but it is still more work for me to build my own social media site than to use another one. And then there are other things like network effects and economies of scale that come in. Also, I thought it was really interesting. At some point, Britt, I think you were there for this at our women's event this year. I was asking someone about what new things are going to be built with AI. And they were basically saying, you know, like a personalized internet. And then they began describing something that was essentially Yahoo. Like it wasn't, but it sort of was, right? And so I think the history of a lot of these things like tends towards personalization, but we haven't all built our own like decentralized banking systems yet, which is maybe possible. So I don't know. Like there's one point of view which just the tools aren't good enough yet, and I think that's probably what you guys would say.
By the way, we kind of have actually, I would argue. So I have two interesting arguments for you. One is, imagine if creating the information.com had taken you a fraction of the time and resources, like the software of it.
It had nothing to do with the software. The software was already easy. I mean, this is my kind of thing with you, is that the software is not...
It's easy, but it's not. For example,
totally
like I'll give you a very concrete example that our customers face challenges with. A lot of our customers have complex business models, like 5 free articles, and it can't be gamed. And Google needs to get the full version of the article. But also, like, you have like one-time article share URLs. Like, these things are not trivial, actually. To do them well and to do it with high performance and high conversion rates, this is why customers come to us all the time saying, like, I need to migrate off this pile of junk that I have. Please make it fast and delightful and personalized. And so if we can lower the barrier to entry so that there's more Jessica lessons out there, because she's using AI.
But just to put, I think the thing you're missing, that is not the barrier to the information, right? The barrier to the information is actually like good reporting, like the work of being a journalist, whatever else. I agree that like having actually in the early days as an intern built a lot of these things that like, you know, permalinks and like share article infrastructure, whatever is like, it's not trivial, but it's damn close to trivial already. And it's certainly tending that way. So I think you can probably lower the barrier a little
It's
bit.
trending that way because of AI. And it's going to get easier and easier and easier.
It's trending that way for a lot of reasons.
I mean, it's just trending that way.
It's just it's been trending that way forever. It's trending that way. I mean, like, so it'll keep trending that way.
AI
I agree
is a profound sea change, you guys.
And that's the thing. So we have basically, by the way, if I were to summarize the step function changes, we have on-prem, really hard. Like actually, that was like legitimately hard. You had to buy software and throw it into the information's closet. Then we got a cloud.
Yep.
Still pretty hard, actually, like figuring out all these instances and networks and whatever and infrastructure. Then we got serverless. That's the space where Vercel lives in. And now we're getting AI, which that is another 10x. So if we start from on-prem to AI-generated personal software, it became 1,000 times easier. And if it becomes 1,000 times easier, you need less of these like super apps. And
Guillermo, just to push you again, like, look, yeah. I agree. I think we'll all agree with the broad trend, but like right now, like take Jessica's business, for instance, her information business. Like what happens right now, practically speaking, you have a bunch of non-technical people that used to start out on WordPress and it was kind of annoying to customize. Then they kind of started on Substack and went for a while. Then like, oh, Substack sucks and they charge too much. So they switched to Ghost, which is the same thing, but easier, right? You could say, hey, Ghost has its limitations. And by the way, we can do AI Ghost and like you can have it more custom. Sure, you can do that. And I think there's some marginal advantage to it. But in my mind, that's like a 5 to 10% problem of like more great businesses, not like the 90% problem. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing, but like it does mean like to me, it fits very nicely into trajectory of like, yes, it's much easier to start all sorts of businesses for all sorts of technical reasons, right?
Yeah, I think my point of view is generating software is actually the killer app of AI. I was interviewing Matt Friedman today for our internal Vercel podcast today, and he was talking about how much conviction Microsoft got into OpenAI because of the effectiveness of Copilot. Like when Satya saw Copilot, when they were doing the initial iterations, they had actually way more ambitious applications they wanted to create with AI. And the one that ended up being the killer app is making people more productive at producing code. And what's happening now is that because the models are getting so much better, we're finding out that we need to make the models better for producing code. And so you use something like Claude, and which is actually one of the main models that powers V0. And it became like 10 times better at designing software all of a sudden. It became 10 times better at creating React applications. And so let's just look at the numbers, right? Like there's 4 million React developers. I can move that from 4 million to 50 million trivially, because now like you just speak English to that thing. Even if like it doesn't do 100% of the job, it's just like this like infinitely available assistant.
So my push to you as an asshole venture capitalist is I think you're on the right side of history, but it's not clear to me how you get paid a lot for it, because there's a lot of ways you'll get there. And like, it's just generally true that the barriers to entry on doing lots of this stuff are going to come down. You know, building software is nice. I do it all the time, and like people will build a lot more of it. But if the marginal cost of building it goes towards zero, and like that's the general trend of history, my big concern for your company will be you're not going to get paid enough for it, right? Because like it'll be commodity.
Well, you still need the infrastructure to run it, right? So it's not just about like writing the code, but if you merge writing the code, if you merge a great experience for designing, if you put in a lot of the taste that I think is really important into the process from the creator point of view, because AI mostly generates a slop. That's something I agree with you, actually. Like we do have to hold AI to like an insanely high bar because there's way too much spending and way too much hype. And a lot of it is the slop. It's just like a lot of it looks horrible. And one of the things that actually we've differentiated in is the vast majority of generations we produce embed our taste into how we would design software. They embed even our like sort of like design system component library. And from there on, we allow you to customize things. So you have to find that sort of balance between it has to be really easy, but also has to be high quality, but also customizable. And I do think that making something 10 times or 100 times more abundant will have very, very, very deep implications to the industry.
So we're almost at time here, but I feel like we have time to hit you with a couple more lightning questions.
Hit me.
We talk a lot about startups on this pod, and we talk a lot about how much the venture capital model has changed dramatically in a way that's really bad for a lot of startups. I'm kind of curious, like, hey, what's a non-obvious startup that you're kind of excited or intrigued by that you think kind of shows something in the ecosystem people could be missing?
Well, I mean, it's as of yesterday, it's not a surprise to anybody. I was really excited about Polymarket before it blew up because I unlike I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley, I try to stay true to my convictions unless I have overwhelming evidence to the contrary. I was an early adopter of Bitcoin, and I never saw anything that would change my mind about it, like the way that people in Silicon Valley have been like pivoting away from it. Like there was no new news, like nothing broke about the cryptography, nothing changed about like the fundamental promise of it, et cetera. But like the whole Silicon Valley switched to like AI, I guess, like if you're in a crypto pivot to AI, right? And I was actually chatting with someone about this yesterday. It's like, it's kind of incredible how bipolar we can be in like chasing these hype waves. Whereas what I saw in Polymarket and I'm starting to see in a lot of other companies is give value to the customer and use decentralized infrastructure under the hood, but don't lead with the decentralized infrastructure. That's just an implementation detail. And so Polymarket is the first company that there's been a few, but
there's a lot. But yeah, I agree with this.
No, but nothing screams crypto about it. I was actually opening it yesterday because I was curious about how the election was going, and that is really cool because I think we're gonna see a lot. I was chatting with the head of crypto at Stripe. I'm excited about stable coins as well. So this is also kind of true to the promise of Vercel. Focus on the front end experience and plug in whatever stuff you want on the back end. In fact, plug in the one that benefits your business the most. Whatever is a different payment gateway, whatever is a different content system, database, whatever. We don't care as long as the experience is fast and delightful. So that was one that comes to mind really quickly. But I'll hit you up if I had another one. Next question.
Well, I applaud you for not actually, I don't think, having AI anywhere on your, no, deploy AI apps in seconds. You almost don't say AI on your homepage because I agree with that the second that this is actually true of most things is whenever people are excited about infrastructure, beware, right? Like infrastructure should disappear. That's the point of infrastructure. And it only gets exciting once it's gone.
Aligned.
So you almost don't say AI on your homepage. Almost.
Yeah, it should be great products.
What about what's your favorite chatbot?
Chatbot. Well, the one we built, I'm biased, obviously, B0.
But I meant the ones you like. Do you like?
You mean
OpenAI, Open Gemini, Claude, whatever? Like which of these do you find yourself using the most? And then I'm going to ask you like the latest thing you use them for.
So I use a combination of. So I use one that perhaps you don't hear as much, which is what the question is going towards. I use Raycast AI, which is like an extension to the operating system, so that I can query multiple AIs. So I press Command.
I love Raycast.
Command Shift Spacebar, and then I get access to a bunch of different models, and I can chat with them in context of whatever I'm doing at the time.
Raycast is so awesome.
I do believe that there will be AI embedded into everything to the point where we stop referring to it incessantly. And I think one of those places will be the operating system. I don't know how much slop Apple shipped with Apple Intelligence, but I do like that it's a layer that permeates across multiple touch points with the customer. So like there is Apple Intelligence in Apple Mail, and there's Apple Intelligence in notifications. And that is more realistic of a future of AI. AI is just everywhere and we don't talk about it. And so Raycast is filling in that gap for me today.
Got it. And like, what's a query you would use it for that doesn't relate to like coding or work or anything?
Everything I tweet gets nitpicked to death. So like I use it for like proofreading a lot of what I say.
Oh, goodness. It's the opposite of how we approach our social media here on the pod.
Specifically, Sam.
It's awesome, and actually this inspires me to create a lot more AI that passively watches the things you say, or like listens to like, you know how like Joe Rogan always invokes Jamie, hey Jamie, can you check this thing? Like I always think about like AI should be like feeding us ideas or corrections or interesting things on top of what we're doing and saying. In the absence of that, the fastest thing I can do is do an interrupt from what I'm doing, quickly consult AI without losing context in the least number of keystrokes, and then come back to the task. So a lot of it is proofreading, or like whenever my memory is faulty, like it's so amazing to be able to sort of have a tool that embraces imprecision in the query. So I'm very bullish on like the vector search space stuff, because what it's doing effectively is you always have it like in like the tip of your tongue, and you have things that surround it in vector space, but you can't just quite grab the thing. And that's where like Reika's AI for me is like, oh, what was that thing? Completely like unclear, and then it gives me that clarity. And being a native Spanish speaker, you could imagine so many idioms and words that just like escape my mind, and I need to bring into like L1 RAM.
Nice analogy.
Got it. Okay. Do you guys have any final things to grow Guillermo on, or any final, like, what else is happening in the world?
Guillermo, why don't you just say I compete with in your Labrador Retriever talk track? Why don't you just be like, I compete with Cloudflare? Because it sounds like you're the core of what you do
Because
is like
Cloudflare
plus
doesn't help you build. Cloudflare comes later. Of course, we compete with Cloudflare, but I see them as like I'm thankful for what they've done to the internet, because there was a lot of software that needed badly to be secured. It was defective. It would go down when traffic waves would hit. It was badly built, bad architecture, not cloud. And so they made a lot of sense in that world. With Cloudflare, it's more like the meme of like, I don't think about you, because when customers build on Vercel, they never end up needing Cloudflare, but they're coming to us to build software, not to sort of like proxy it or whatnot.
Fair enough.
But that's a good call.
You know, it's a very, that answer strikes me as something I've been trying to grill into founders for 11 years. And so I'll just grill it into you now. But like, everyone's so afraid. Like, it's actually helpful, I think, for a lot of people to have the comparison to other services, and then you can talk about why you're better. But I think so many founders are afraid to be like,
we're the this for
like,
that.
You know, when I launched The Information, if I tried to convince people that like we were nothing like the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg, like that would be difficult. And if I was just like, yeah, we're similar in that we do this, but here's what we do that's way better. So anyway, I think it would be okay in your pitch.
I would argue the opposite. Like, The Information is so unique to me that I never thought to compare to anything else.
Aww.
Yeah, that's true. I get that advice sometimes too.
You get that? You get that sometimes?
I know.
That's nice.
You could prime me with a comparison, and then my mind will like go elsewhere. So
That's
that
true.
could be
a
dangerous
good friend
too.
of ours
question
keeps asking me why I compare us to those other things. But I don't know. Like, for journalists, it's helpful to know that we think of ourselves. Anyway.
Yeah, when I speak to a CIO or a CISO, I will for sure bring it up. Like, in fact, I tell them like, you're spending way too much on Cloudflare and Akamai, and the website still sucks. That's actually what I tell them.
See, now Sam will invest. That's a pitch.
So I think I would say, here's my basic my thing on this, and to kind of riff on what Justin is like, we have been.
It's okay. He'll come back.
Cloudflare. Yeah.
Cloudflare.
The internet took him down.
He's probably using some kind of like VPN.
Start that thought again, Sam. Go.
Here. So I'm actually not on a VPN right now for this very reason, but I would say, so I think that the thing about Silicon Valley is we've been trained on these Terra Nova narratives, right, of homesteading, right? Like the early internet, what was so exciting about it, it was just totally homesteading. It was like, hooray, there's a new thing, go out and stake claims, and like you're not competing with anyone, it's all Terra Nova.
Infinite blue ocean.
The funny thing is I actually think that people love that narrative because it sounds like mostly Silicon Valley people are nice and like they don't want to like be compete. They're nice people. They don't want to fight. But I think what's happened and where we are now is like we're in a fight era, right? Where like there isn't Terra Nova. Like AI is not Terra Nova, right? AI is just new weapons for a war. And so as a result, like you just want to be like, no, like we're now fighters. AIs are new weapons. And like we're fighting over the same territory. We're just doing it with new tools. And I think that's just like a different mentality where like in a fight, you're like, I'm fighting Bill. I'm fighting Cloudflare versus like, no, it's all new, you know?
It really depends on who. For startups, we're hardly ever, for AI startups, we're hardly ever fighting Cloudflare. So for example, just to use the example from the election, Polymarket was born in Vercel. For Washington Post, we're fighting Akamai. And for Minnesota Star Tribune, we fought on-prem. And they moved off of the legacy into the new homestead land of Vercel. So it depends on who you're talking to. I think for enterprise, you're absolutely right. Like when you get into like deep enterprise, everyone's fighting for your workload, and like the big banks and the big insurance companies, they have 20 vendors courting them at any given point, and it's more of a knife fight.
Yeah.
Okay. We covered a lot of ground, guys. Morins, anything else
That's a lot of ground.
we should hit? I mean, there's other things happening in the world, but
Dave, what's the price of Bitcoin the next time we do this talk? In a week from now.
I haven't even looked at it today.
I think it's 75 today. 75.
What is the price of Doge?
I mean, I'm actually shocked, Sam.
Who cares?
I'm shocked that what was the move? 10%, 15%. I'm actually shocked that it was so small. Does it say something about how small the crypto market actually is?
I feel like the crypto markets take like 2 days to correct, though.
No, it was also already like dramatically priced in. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like not. I don't know. I think people. It's an interesting question. Doge, are you a big Doge holder, Guillermo?
So I organized the first Doge conference in the world, DogeCon SF.
oh my
Don't know, in fact,
God.
That's
about me.
amazing.
When did you buy your first Dogecoin?
So I got some from the creator, and the creator, what he did, it was a hilarious thing. He forked Bitcoin, changed 2 lines of code,
Oh, I'm aware.
and launched it. It was all of a sudden it was Dogecoin. He added inflation, which was one parameter, and he changed how many coins existed.
Well, and he sold all of his for like a Mazda Miata or something, like way back in the day.
And he's very bitter.
All of you Miata people. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Sargur, and I'm looking back at my first Doge email in 2014, where Sargur, who's a friend of all of ours, sent a few of us a note about it, saying there's this interesting thing called Dogecoin. It's being used in like Reddit for like weird tipping shit.
Doge
and he had like this whole
Remember Doge tip
he
bot?
had this whole like super thesis on it in 2014. It's a great email.
And now it might become the American currency.
No, it's
Oh my
kind of a
God.
joke. Although I will say it's the only cryptocurrency I've ever lost. I had like 10 million Doge.
Oh, this was not a happy day.
Which was like $10.
I bought 10 million Doge for like.
What are you talking about, Sam? You've
$5,000.
lost a lot of crypto to a lot of different places.
Well, no, that was stolen.
Or other people lost your crypto.
Barry
to be
Silbert
accurate.
has some
Yeah.
of my Bitcoin, unfortunately, but that's I'll live. Thankfully, and a Facebook server somewhere buried in some archive has about 10 million Doge. If anyone can find that for me.
The spirit of it was like fun and just like experimenting and tinkering. And I think maybe to bring it full circle to what Dave and I originally connected over is just make people creators again, less consumer drones of like infinite social media feeds. And whether it's launching your own cryptocurrency or creating your website, your publication, or anything more serious, I think it's a worthwhile pursuit.
But people love being drones. That's like what they like wake up and they want to be drones.
Oh, Sam.
Some
But
people.
no, I think it's super compelling. Well, Guillermo, thank you for joining us. This was really fun. And thanks for putting up with, our half pitch session, half
Love it.
media criticism. And yeah.
I'm going
and,
to try to deploy our website on Vercel and add a chatbot.
I mean, Sam
Great.
is a super creator.
Thank you for having me. Super fun.
And to all our listeners, viewers, back channel, thank you guys for the insights, for joining us. It is a very interesting time right now, and we are psyched to share our opinions, what we're hearing, and hear from all of you. So thank you guys. If you haven't, make sure to check out the feed on YouTube, as well as some of the shorts and clips we're sharing. And we'll see you here next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
See you later.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.